rec and res, yeah.
Okay, rec and res and
then equal sign, and then arrow pointing to the right, yeah. And then open your curly brackets.
okay, looking good so far.
Yeah. And then now you can say, okay, below, since we created our server there, and then let's say just go outside there, and then press your enter, yeah. And then let's run it here. Let's say server dot
Server dot
listen.
listen.
So we gotta listen to our local server and our cloud server. So we're gonna say three, okay, port,
Port.
and then comma, host name.
Okay.
And then yeah, let's open your brackets, and then uh we're gonna say not inside, just outside your brackets, we're gonna say equal sign, then arrow left, and we're gonna say curly brackets. And then in there, let's say, okay, before after hostman there, put a comma, host name.
Nice
Okay, yeah.
catch.
Yeah, and then say console log server running.
Okay, console log server running. Let us see.
Yeah.
I knew this was going to fail. Unfortunately, I have something running at 3,000, so we need to
Okay.
update that.
Okay. Yeah,
And
that's fine. Yeah.
there we are. Okay, thank you for that, Ronald. Tabang, I didn't miss you. I saw that you had your hand up. So, Tabang, can you actually help us with the URL? We need to make sure that we handle the URL properly. We are going to be focused on the student URL. That's the data we're going to be working with today. So how do we go about that?
Okay, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I hope you can hear me.
I can.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with the URL, as we did last week in the example, I think we need to use a if statement.
Okay, so we have an if statement, and then what do I
Yes.
put inside?
But before the if statement, according to how I understand it, we need to first to require from the const URL equal to require URL so that we can access the path.
Are you saying I should come back right at the top?
Yes.
Okay, so you're saying we are getting URL.
Yes.
Okay, you can walk me through your steps.
Okay. You have to create a variable for const URL.
Const URL.
Yes, and equals to require the double quote URL.
Double quote URL.
Require is same as importing, if I may ask.
In a sense, yes. It depends on the what is it? The node, is it node version?
Oh,
No, 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 no,
okay.
no, 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 no. It's the ESMAScript version. So there's syntax, the syntax is version 5, while importing is actually version 6.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we can
Yeah.
proceed now to the if statement.
Okay.
Okay, and we will let me see. Okay, and then we will say because we need to pass the URL. I'm not sure about this which
Mm.
which I want to do before the if statement. Can you please go up here and so that we can pass the URL so we can be able to access all the incoming data. Yeah, we can
Okay,
create
which
we,
right here.
yes, you can create a new variable for past URL, which is equals to. So now we're going to use our imported variable to access the pass. We say URL.pass. and open bracket and require dot URL and comma and true. No, sorry. Not require, sorry. Req is REQ, man, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah,
Rec and
yes, URL.
URL.
And then comma true. And then, yeah, comma, not dot, sorry. Yes, now we are having our past URL. So now we have to access the path for the URL. We create the last variable now for ourselves. Then we'll continue. We say const path.
Const path.
Path, yes, path. You know this English thing.
It's okay, guy. Const path
equals to past URL past the variable which you created up there, yes. And then we access the dot path name. Yes, yeah. Yes, now we go back to our if statement now. And then you can say path equals triple equals to and double quotes and slash and students. Yes, and then inside the if statement, so can I ask a question?
Yes, you can ask.
Yes, as we are here, Konjo said, what are we accessing? We are doing we are doing the get or the which one which we're working with?
Oh, in terms of that, we are doing everything. So we're going to be getting, posting, reading. Wait, getting and reading is the same thing. We're going to be updating as well as deleting.
Okay. With the get one, let's say, let's do this. We have to create another if statement again inside.
Do you need any help? Because I see Ronald has.
Okay, yes.
Right now. Yeah, Ronald has his hand up, but I need more people to be talking.
Okay, let me just.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, if he can get it, he can continue. It's fine. If it's still on, but yeah, I'll be around if he gets any issues.
Okay, thank you. Okay, inside the if statement, you can use req rec dot method. Then we're accessing. We want to see which equals to that triple equals to in double quote get. Yes. And then you open the the bracket.
Which bracket?
The bracket for the if.
Yes, we already have the bracket. So which bracket are you talking about?
Oh, for the if the one which we just created now.
You're supposed to actually mention whether it's the squiggly one, because remember we have too many brackets when it comes to JavaScript. All of this exists.
Okay,
yeah.
I think someone can assist me because I wanted us to test whether it is going through here or Ganja. Yeah, then can just say.
Okay, Ronald, do you want to step in? He wants someone to type.
Yeah. So now, we getting what? You can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so now we're getting for what? For the student?
Yes, we are getting for the student. So he wanted to see if it actually works.
Okay, so now, but we'll modify it later. So let's say rest dot send header.
Rest dot
set header.
Okay.
And then circle brackets, then we're gonna say inside, you're gonna open your quotation, you're gonna say content dash type with uppercase C for content and uppercase T for type.
Okay.
And then you're gonna say a comma, and then we're sending a JSON type content. So we're gonna say brackets, then you're gonna say application / JSON.
Okay.
Yeah, and then below you can say res.send.
Res.send.
And then open your brackets.
Sorry about that. Autocomplete. Open.
Okay, in there, I want to test if it's gonna work. So in there, you can just write inside res.send, you can just write, you can open your brackets and write a student, and let's see when testing if we get that. If not, then we're gonna say rest.end. Let's see.
So wait, you're saying res.send and then students.
Yeah, we have rest.send and we have rest.end. So I might be confusing them. So, but here, let's, you can do on Postman and you can send.
Okay, so that was on, it was a GET request. The server killed itself. It says rest.send is not a function.
Okay, let's say rest.end, and we're gonna say inside, we're gonna say JSON dot, we're gonna stringify the content. So, yeah.
Okay, let us see if that works. Okay, there we are. So yeah, it does work.
Yeah, so you want to continue or we end it here?
No, I think
we're gonna do the post and get, because yeah, we can do the others. It's fine. So in most cases, what I do what you did last time. So I create a function above, then just to avoid having a lot of if statement, if we were to have different routes for students and learners and teachers, and yeah. So
okay, so you create functions to have, wait, it's for different resources, right? Different paths.
Yeah, it's for different endpoints.
Okay, endpoint templates, create different functions. Okay, for now, there's no need to do that. You don't have to create the different parts, because we're only going to be focusing on the students. In terms of what I have planned, it's going to be a bit too much if we focus on other parts also.
Okay.
So right now we have this, we have that. Let us see what happens if I remove the students, right? We remove that, we send. I'm stuck in a loop.
Yeah, so this one is the main route. We can change it if you can still hear me.
Yes, I can still hear you, but now because this is not, it's not returning anything, meaning that it's endlessly running. So how do we deal with this?
Yeah, let's modify the code. So so initially before that student /student, we could have just left it as like a /, but now let's create another if statement below the one for path. Yeah. Else if yeah, else if. And then we're gonna say if path is equals to /.
If path equals to /.
Let's remove this.
Why am I writing student?
Yeah, and then we can console log something there, because it's that path that we're hitting there. You can just no data found or something. Yeah.
Okay, so done that, and you are correct. But now, how do I make sure that this actually terminates?
So we need to return something.
I have no idea.
Okay, we do the same thing that we did on line 19 and 20. So you can copy that line from 20 to 19. Yeah, and paste it there.
And then paste.
And then you can, on student, you can write, before student, you can write not, no students found.
Okay, no students found. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. Send. That's correct. I'm going to need someone else for this though. We need a bit of help because it says no students found, but at the same time, it's giving us a status of 200, which means okay, meaning there's no issue whatsoever with our request.
Yeah.
And this is very deceiving. So other than Ronald and Tabang, we need another participant. Let me see. Yes, Tulufelo. Tulufelo, you can talk. I think, yeah, you can talk. Okay, seems like Tulufelo is having some issues. Musa Wenkosi, you can come in.
Hi guys, how are you?
All good, yourself?
I'm okay. Like I think we'd have to set the status code to 404 on
Okay, and
yeah. Set
how
the
do we
status
do that?
code.
Remember, you have to guide me step by step.
Oh, I think it's rest the status code.
Rest.status code.
Oh, I'm not sure. Maybe it's the open bracket
Okay,
404.
404.
And the like rest dot, and I think that should be an empty bracket.
So you're saying remove all of that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's check it out. The server killed itself yet again. Rest.status code is not a function. So there's something wrong with this line of code. How do we fix it?
Like, should it be status code equals to 404?
Okay, we have that. Let's go back. And there we go. 404, it couldn't be found. So now our server knows that we can hit the main path, but there's nothing that's being served on our main path. Therefore, it should be a 404. But in most cases, this is not standard practice. This will always have something to actually
Okay.
display. But anyway, so that has been properly handled. Thanks for that, Musa Wenkosi.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, cool. So in terms of the data that we're actually sending back, the JSON.stringify students, this one, it works, but we have a problem. Wait, this is get as an end student. Okay, let's come back to this guy over here. We'll come to that and we have this. Now, I didn't cover this last time, but I'm going to cover it briefly, right? When it comes to JSON, the JSON, this, Let me write it at the bottom. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So when it comes to this guy, this is it is an object. That's why it looks more or less like any object that you actually use in JavaScript. Started off in JavaScript, but now all languages actually utilize it. In JavaScript, you use it to represent data that you work with. So, for example, if we were to have students, for example, down here, we actually no, let's just have one student because I want to have an array. We have student, we've been working with this kind of notation before. We have a corner, we have, maybe we can have the surname, which in this case, like that, would be Macy, and then we can have the age. Right, so this is a JavaScript object. But then when it comes to JSON, if we come back to this side, let me see where we have a post. This is a more of a valid JSON object. In JavaScript, you would go straight into writing the actual key. But when it comes to JSON, it actually needs to be like this. So single quotation marks are not recognized in JSON, only double quotations. And that applies for both the actual key as well as the property. When it comes to numbers, you can go straight ahead and actually just put them as integers, or they can also be your decimals. So this is still valid. That is valid, depending on the use case, of course. And that is also valid. That is also valid. The reason I'm putting it like this is going to be an ID. So an ID, there's a possibility it might start, okay, and I deleted the whole thing. It might start with a 0. But if we have it as a number, the 0 will get removed. And then it breaks our collection. So usually when working with identifiers, you want them to be strings because if all these other numbers start with zeros, then you still want the zeros to be kept. You want them to be respected. So this is a valid JavaScript object. If we want this to be not JavaScript, but JSON object, we'd actually have to do it this way instead. And that. This is still valid, but this would have to be double quotations. So I'm not going to go into too much details when it comes to this guy, but the main point is just to show that when it comes to objects in JavaScript, you can actually write them in multiple different ways because you can actually have them as if this is a variable in a sense, and then single quotations also work. But when it comes to the actual JSON object, you need to respect these rules. And go back. I remember last time I showed you guys this. This is actually, as you can see, it's package.json. This is a JSON object. So the first thing that we need is the brackets. The curly brackets are always the first thing that help us identify if a JSON object is actually valid. So now, in terms of where are you, in terms of this, does this match the rules of JSON? Let me see. Ronald, we're gonna come back to you. Mkolisi, are you able to talk? Mkolisi Sibaya. Yeah, Mkolisi Sibaya, are you able to talk?
Police, you can unmute your mic. You can unmute your mic. Okay, Police doesn't want to talk.
I think some of these people are sleeping. They just join the meeting and go to sleep. But anyway, Aluwani Paswana. I hope I did not butcher your name.
Yes, Alwani.
Okay, we have 2 volunteers. Let me double check. Karabo and Joseph.
Good day, sir.
Hi.
Yeah, I just wanted to answer that question that you have asked. We can display just the plain text student because what is there is just the plain text. So that means we must just handle it with an object.
Okay, and how do we fix that? Because right now it says JSON, but what I'm seeing, right, is plain text, like you said. So how do we update that code? I'm going to comment this out.
Mhm.
So how do we fix it?
I think there on the rest.end.
Mhm.
On the rest.end, I'll just say if the rest, okay, now rest.setHead content, okay, yeah, that is okay. Then I'll just say rest.end JSON the stringify error. So yeah, stringify, then in brackets, then I'll just say curly brackets error, then yes. Yes, something like that. Then just what do they call that punctuation? Uh
Which one? You can describe it.
yeah, the 2 dots. You see the 2 dots.
Got you.
Yeah, it's two dots and it must say oh no, not there. Not there because if we are doing it there as let's just do it on the else if statement. You see there on the else if statement there must be rest.end JSON stringify then an error that says not found.
Okay, no, I do understand. I understand what you're saying, but remember right now we are focused on this guy, the block of code
Okay,
that is
okay,
returning students.
okay, I understand. So but
So,
now if we are saying returning if we are returning students, that means we must have an object that displays, I mean an object that carries students so that we can stringify it so that it can be displayed. But it
okay,
seems
so
like
for now we don't have the actual data. So let's pretend we are returning um maybe let's say an empty variable. How would you do that? How would you handle it?
an
And then we'll
empty
update after.
an empty variable is just like an object. So I would say JSON does stingify students, then that two two dotted sign. Yes, students, then two dotted sign. Yes, then I'd say
Yes.
students, I mean.
Hmm. Usually, how do you represent a collection or a list of items?
You represent it by curly brackets or maybe that what corner brackets. It depends if your collection is an array or an object.
Okay, in this case, we're going to have an array. Remember, student will now be a collection of related objects. So we can actually have more data in terms of the student.
Okay,
But
now I understand. So So let's just use let's just use an object. So it's gonna be students. Then yeah, just cancel that one. Let's try curly brackets. Yes, then its name, then the name of the student. Then the same name of the student. And also the is it the grade? Yeah.
Okay, I think we can continue with this. We
Okay.
send, and we now have that.
Yes.
But I have a complaint. Ne?
Okay.
We have our JSON object valid. We have, in terms of how they look, it's all valid. But I feel like the name here is deceiving because it says student, but in terms of the object, we can only have one.
One student.
Cannot
Oh,
have
it
one.
must be only student. It must say student.
Got you. We'll come back to fix this. Thank you very much for the participation. But I think for now, I think we are okay.
Thank you, Mr.
All right, thank you. Nkolisi, you have your hand up. Do you want to ask a question or did you want to help? You can unmute.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
No? Oh, okay, cool. Perfect. So it's a bit of both. So I think it's since remember the path of the endpoint in itself is students. So I think it would make sense that since we're returning that objects, the key can still be students, but instead of just passing one object there, we pass an array of objects. So we just essentially just put that object inside square brackets. And yeah, then we can just go back. If you want to add more data, we can go back to it.
All right. Thank you very much for picking that up. Thank you very much for picking that up. So seems like you guys actually understand everything that we covered last week. And because you understand that, we are now going to go to the more difficult parts. So we're going to be introducing a new module. But in terms of what you said, I'm not sure if I did mention it last week, but you are very much correct. When you have a path like this represents multiple items. So in this case, we have students, meaning that when we are retrieving our actual information, we are expecting a list of items. So in this case, it's students. So we're expecting an array, since that's how we recognize a list in most cases in JavaScript or in JSON. So we're expecting that. And then obviously, if we have another object, then that would actually have a comma, and then so on and so forth. And then last week, we didn't actually send any data to our API. We didn't send any data to our API. We also didn't really read information that was dynamic. We were using static information because we're using an array. So today we're actually going to dive a bit deeper. We're going to be looking at what happens if, for example, I'm trying to get information from this path, but I only want one specific student, meaning that I already know their ID. I want the rest of their information. So I can do all of that so that I can actually retrieve that specific person. This is what we're going to be looking at. And because of that, since we need to make sure that we have Okay, so we have students, we have that, we have that. I'm going to be copying this to a different section for readability. Like they said, handle the endpoints here. So I'm going to take this out, basically cut it, and then handle students request. And then I'm going to create that function. So we have the students request. Obviously, we have the rec and res. So we actually need to make sure that we pass those also. Okay, that is supposed to be an equal sign, and then we have that over there. Then we paste it right in there. And obviously, we just edited our code, so we need to double check if it still works or it breaks. In this case, it's breaking. So what am I missing? Okay, it was not me. I had added an extra forward slash. But anyway, we have that. So this is actually being handled by this guy. What we can do, last time I remember someone actually asked me, what is the best practice to write your code? As you can see, when we have code like this, it gets messy. We have this right in the same file. We have this, and this is going to be very, very long. So what you would want to do in most cases is create your own file aside where you can actually have maybe students requests. And then the function that we actually have on the student server, this guy, we cut out the whole thing, come to the student's request, and then we put it in there. But then right now, this is actually not accessible from student server. So how do we actually handle that? Well, for this, we actually need to make use of, what is it? Module exports. So it's exports dot. If I'm not mistaken, then this should actually allow us to actually have access to this function. So in a sense, we're actually now creating our own modules. Remember before we're utilizing modules that are coming from Node, like we did here as well as here. But now we are creating our own internal modules that we can actually use anywhere in our code. So now we have handled students request, and then we need to make sure that we actually import it. So I'm going to have this up here. So I'm going to have const, what did I call it? Handle students request. I'm just going to copy all of that, paste it in there. And then this is going to be require students request. Let's come back, and as you can see, so the reason I'm hovering on top of it is I was waiting for this auto. What is this? Is it definition or explanation? If you don't see this in your code, then that means there's something wrong with your import. Like you can see here, it actually explains exactly what's happening. So that's the same thing I'm doing this side, just trying to see if it actually works. So we can actually still hit that endpoint and we still have our results. But we are now handling this in a different file for readability, right? Because we're going to have all the other methods down here. So let's go ahead and actually include this, guys. We have rec dot method. We're looking for post. So this is a post request. Go ahead and do that. As otherwise, there's actually supposed to be else if red dot method equals to in terms of us updating, we're going to be using the put, not the patch. Do that instead. So remember, this is for updating. This is for posting or creating, and this is for getting or reading. And then we're going to have else if reg.method equals to delete. Then this is for deleting. So spelling. This is for deleted. And by the way, when it comes to what I'm writing here, even if this is actually small letters, it still works. I just prefer using caps because that tends to be the industry standard when you are specifying the methods. People prefer using the caps, so that's what I'm sticking to. So we now have all this information. I'm just going to take this guy for now. There's still a lot of work that we actually need to do in terms of this. So in terms of posting, we can just say, okay, we have the student, we can have message, and then say created, comma. We also need the status code. Status codes are very important. Very, very, very important. So this is going to be 200. The get res.status code equals to 200, and then with the delete, the put same thing. Let's have that. Have that. So this is created. That is when you're receiving. This is when you're updating. This is when you are deleting. So this is supposed to say deleted. Sorry about that. So let's just double check. We have the get. That works. We have the post. Doesn't really matter what information we're sending, but as you can see, we have the created, and then it returns back the list of students. In this case, we'll just be returning the student that just got created. This is not there yet. We have the put. This is not there yet also because we still have a little bit of work that we actually need to do. And then delete also. Okay, so this is also not going to work. That is also not going to work. So in order to make sure that all of this actually does something, we are going to have a file manager. 1016. I'm not sure. Mahlatsi, should I continue or do you think they need a bit of a break before I dive into the rest of the session?
Yes, I think we can just take a 5-minute break and then we'll be back at 10:21.
All right, cool.
Okay,
See you
thanks.
guys at 10:21 then.
It's 10:21. Is everyone back? By show of hands, can you raise up your hand so that I can see whether you're back or not? Okay, thank you so much. Vukona, are you back? Vukona?
Yes, I am back.
Okay, okay. Okay, I
All
think we can,
right.
everyone is back now.
All right, cool. Before I jump in, guys, Konjo, what is a module? Can I have someone answer that real quick? Yes, Kwanele?
Okay, Kwanele, you can unmute. Morning, Kwanele, how are you?
They're
All
actually
right.
unmuted. They have no idea what's happening.
Yeah, I think there's a problem with their mic. We can move on to Mbali for a change. Mbali,
Good morning.
morning, Mbali.
I think it's pieces of code that provide functionality.
Okay, I'll take that. I'll take that. Thank you very much, Mbali. So in terms of what we need to do now, the reason I requested a bit of a break for you guys is we're currently looking at the basics that we looked at in terms of Node.js last week, with the back and forth interaction wise. But now we are going to be introducing something else, a different module. In this case, the module is going to be basically, like you say, pieces of code that allow us now to manipulate files on the system. In terms of what we're going to do, however, all this data that we currently have, which is kind of, it's actually dummy data. There's nothing useful about this information because we had to write it. Or we have it on an array. In our previous lesson, we had it on the array. So now we are going to have this stored in a file. And remember what I said in terms of this guy right here, the object notation, which is used in JavaScript, JS, short for JavaScript, to store data, right? To store data. It's used, we've been using it in our API also. So it's also used in APIs to send and receive data. But in the case of the package.json, it's used for settings in terms of the project at least. But in our case, we are going to be creating our own JSON file, which we're going to be using as a database. So you can also use it used for data storage. In terms of this is like temporary while the application is running, and then we're going to be using it for data storage, file-wise. And then this is going to be more permanent. Remember, the only difference between temporary and permanent in most cases, temporary means the data only exists while the application is running. With permanent, that means you'll forever have access to the data, and whatever changes you make will always be there until you delete. So it's permanent, but until you delete. So we're going to be using this in our server. So we're going to be creating a file called file management.javascript.js. You can actually name it whatever you want, but I need it to be specific to that. So in terms of this guy, we are going to be, it's actually supposed to be file manager, not management. But anyway, I need to remove this. bugs me. Okay, so file manager. So in terms of the module that we're going to use, it's a module that allows us to create a file, delete a file, read data from the file, update data on the file, delete data on the file, and the other operation, which I think I have forgotten. So I'm just going to be manipulating data on the file. So for this is a module called FS. So remember when I said Node actually gives JavaScript superpowers. JavaScript is not supposed to be able to read directly from the file system, but because of Node, you can now actually read data directly from the file system, which is actually very pretty impressive. So for this, we are going to have a function called create file because we don't have our file at the moment. So the create file function is going to just ensure that we actually have the file we want to work with. Obviously, I can just create it directly, but that is not great in terms of GitHub and actually sending my project to other people if they actually want to utilize it for whatever purposes. In that case, they should also be able to create the file using the code. So that's why I'm using doing it programmatically. And then for this, I'm also going to have a constant variable for our file name. And then this is going to be db.json, or we can actually just have it in full as database.json so I don't lose people. And then the reason I'm doing it like this, constant variables in JavaScript at least tend to have all caps because people want to actually be able to separate them from the other variables that are only used here and there. So when you have it like this, it signifies the importance of the actual variable that you created. But it doesn't really matter if you have it either small caps or what is this? Large caps. So I have it like this because one mistake in terms of how you use your variable, you might actually get lost. So the first thing that we have is open, and obviously we actually need to acquire this from this guy. So I'm just going to do this. I'm going to have that. Wait a minute. Okay, this doesn't seem to work the way I wanted it to. Works on imports, however. But anyway, we can actually have a second line. So I don't think I'm actually going to use FS directly because I need what's inside FS. So we're going to have open. This is the first thing that we are going to be using. This is going to accept the path, in this case, our file name, and then we're going to have the mode, which is going to be signified as WX, and then we're going to have a callback, which returns either the error or a result with the information of the file. So if we have an error, oh, by the way, in terms of this code, this is, let me see if I can, nope, I need to open a new tab. Open new window. This is information that I'm getting directly from Node on their website. So just to show where most of the information that I get is, it's all here where is, I'm looking for for file system, which is FS. And then when you go through this website, it actually gives you blocks of code that you can actually use for your own use case. But to be honest, for me, even this website is a bit all over the place. Like it's hard to actually find information if you're a beginner. So I would recommend sticking to blogs for this use case if you want to find out exactly what's happening, because this has too much information and it can be overwhelming. But that's where I'm actually getting this. So they actually give you snippets that you can actually utilize or just to get started to build whatever application that you want to build. Anyway, so if we have an error, we have the error code, so error.code, and then this is supposed to be all caps. And then we just have a console log to say file exists. And then we want to stop that from running. So we're going to have the return block. And then with this main function, we can have a main if statement, we can have an else block to actually create the collections that we're going to use. So remember, we said we're going to be working with students. And if you do get lost, please raise up your hand so we can ask a question and then I can help out, because this is more or less like enemy territory at this point. We are going to now, if the file does not exist, we actually want to go ahead and wait. If the file doesn't exist, we want to go ahead and actually create the file with the collections that we need to make use of. So for this, we are going to create another function called create collections. And then down here, we are going to call that create. My bad. We're going to call that create collections function. So this is a function that will run as soon as the server is actually set up. We will always make sure that we actually do have some file to actually work with. So in the create collections function, what we are going to do is we are going to have another function called read file. So we actually need to pass that also. And for people who are wondering, this and this is more or less the same. But if you're doing it this way, then that means everywhere you actually want to make use of something. For example, right now when I want to use a read file, you would actually have to call fs.read file. So every time you want to use a sub-module or a function in this module, then you'd actually have to call fs first. But if you do it this way, you can actually call the function itself directly. So same thing, but I prefer doing it this way. So we're going to have a read file. And then with the read file, we actually need to tell it what file to open. In this case, remember, we have file name, which is all caps. And then we have the format that we're going to utilize. In this case, I'm going to choose UTF-8. And then we have the callback. So what we're going to do here is, first of all, let's just see what happens. Like we are going to console our data. Let's just double check exactly what happens in terms of our code. So here we're going to say creating collections. And then we need to be able to call that file. And remember, I said that is actually just going to be called the moment the server is running. So we can actually just call it outside. So we don't actually need to nest this in any block of code. And then save that, student server. Let me see. So file manager, but we're using this in the students request. Because we only have one. No, it's fine. We can actually call this side. So we can actually, what is it? Check if file exists. So in this case, our file, remember this is our database. So I'm just making sure if our database exists. I think I can actually do it this way instead. Export start create file. That way I can actually call it on the other side. So create file, student server. We are going to have that, and then create file. This is coming from our guy in file manager. Over on that. Okay, and that is okay. So create server, we have all of that, server.listen. And as you can see, I've updated and then it says creating collections. So where are we? Where are we? It creates, trying to create that collections. And we now have this file. But at the moment, it's actually blank. We have database.json. It's currently blank. So what we actually need to do in this case, it's reading that, read file. We have our data. Our data was actually not consoled because we don't actually have data in our file yet. So what we need to do, because this is actually a JSON file, we need to make sure that it actually respects the rules of JSON. So the first thing, if there's empty information, for example, or if it's empty, it should just appear like this. Or another thing that we can do, since we already know the kind of information we're working with, we can actually create a student array and then just set it to empty. So if there's no data, by default it's empty, but otherwise we start adding objects in this. And then obviously if you're working with more information, you would actually have it something like this, books, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to be writing a block of code that forces it to actually have that by default. So this is where we now are going to have an array. Let's call this data collections. And then in terms of the data collections, it's an object. Remember, JSON is an object, and then in your object, you have the actual data that you want to make use of. So we're going to have students and then set it to an empty array. And then after doing that, we want to go ahead and actually append file that's not imported. So let's go ahead and add that append file. So we're going to append file, appending file, that means you're just going to be adding an item. So because right now it's empty, this is what I'm going to be using. So we're going to pass the file name, and then we're going to json.stringify our information, which is the data collections. And then from here, if we have any error, it should actually give us that error. if error, we want to go ahead and actually throw the error. Otherwise, we want to say collections created. It says file exists. We don't have that data. Let's delete that. Move to recycle bin. Cool. Save. Come back, and there we are. And as you can see, my code is actually not, it's not the best, and I'm not going to actually like optimize it, because in order to make sure that the file is respecting our structure, that means I actually need to remove it. But in a real life scenario, you always want to make sure that you have checks in place to make sure that if the file exists, go ahead and actually check that. But I'm doing it the simpler way. So you delete, and then we now have this data. So currently we just have an empty array, which we are okay with. We are okay with this. So this is us creating the collections, we're creating a file, that's okay. What we want to do now is, since we already have the data, we want to create another function for retrieving the list of students. So in this case, we are expecting it to actually just show us an array, and which is empty. So we're going to have export dot get students. And I think that this has been mentioned before. When you're creating functions, you need to make sure that they're actually self-explanatory, so that whoever reads your code actually understands what's happening. So if you have a weird function name like this, people have no idea what's happening. Sometimes people just call something function one, which is okay. It meets the, okay, why is that caps? This is okay, it meets the criteria for creating a function using camel casing, but at the same time, it doesn't really say much in terms of what it aims to achieve. So when you have get students, you know that you're getting students from somewhere. So what we're going to do with the get student is, first of all, we need to actually make this async. So remember last time I spoke about asynchronous code and synchronous code. In this case, I'm going to be making this async, and this returns a promise. I'm going to show you how that works. So in a sense, we're actually creating our own promise. This is one of the ways you can do that. Sorry about that. We are going to, let me see. We are going to use a different method. We had read file here. We also had read file sync. This one is asynchronous. This one is synchronous, but they do more or less the same thing. I'm going to be using them both. Why? Because there's so many ways to skin a cat, and I'm not going to limit myself to just one method. So that's wrong. This is actually supposed to be data equals to read file async. Sorry about that. And then this side, we're just going to pass it the file name, which is not that file name. And then in the data, because we actually have the data, it's actually going to come back as, let me actually do this, sort of explaining. Let me show what's going to happen. Get student, we are going to be using it when it, okay, no, that's not the one I'm looking for. We are going to be using it this side. So in terms of this, we are going to have get student, as you can see, importing that or requiring it from file manager. So we're going to have get students. And then this is actually supposed to be a promise, as you can see. It's not just saying it's a function, it's showing us that it's a promise or void. So we're going to have that. This is how you interact with a promise. You call the function you want to call, an object gets returned, and in order to consume the data from that object, if it is successful, you use the .then block, which is now going to have our result. I'm not returning anything at the moment, but that's where that will actually come in. But then if we have any error that we face when we make that request to the function, it's going to appear in our .catch block. So this is where you're going to have your errors. So I can just console log error, and then all of this, because we are now depending on this function in terms of our data, you can actually now put it inside. But obviously this is not proper, because if you have an error, it shouldn't be a status of 200. In most cases, if you have an error, it's usually 500, meaning that the server broke. So we have that, and we are testing for what happens in terms of that information. Let's go to our GET request. That is where we need to be with that information. But if you come this side, as you can see, this is our data is actually of type buffer, right? Which means we cannot actually do much in terms of this. So we actually need to turn it into something readable. And in terms of our case, we can actually, let's say we have JSON data, we can actually just JSON parse our information. So it's actually going to turn this information into a JSON object. So what we're going to do is JSON that, and then console log JSON data. Let's do that. Go back to Postman. We hit that, and then as you can see, now we have information that we can actually read. So because of that, it's returning all the information, but however, we only want the students list. So how do we do that? We can actually do like this, just in data dot student. Go back to Postman, send, and as you can see now, in terms of our result, remember result is this side. This is the result. So it's actually showing us an empty array. So now it's actually working, meaning that we can now replace this guy with the actual information that we're getting up there. So let's save that, come this side, hit send, and now we have an empty array. So our information is no longer static. We are now getting data directly from our mock database in this case. So we have that. And what we now need to do, because currently we can only do what they get empty data, we need to also be able to actually send data to, okay, sorry. We need to be able to send data to our API. And for that, we're going to need another file. So after I've done the posting part, I'm going to wait and be able to take questions if there are going to be any before we continue. But for now, let's go ahead and actually export dot. So let's create our function. Here we're going to be create, actually we are not creating, we're adding student. So add student. And then in terms of this, we are going to be getting the name, we have the surname, we have the age, as well as the ID. Right, so this is the data that we're actually going to be getting. And in order for this to actually work properly, we first need to be able to grab this information. So we need to get the information that we currently have and then grab this array. Because obviously, in most cases, you'll have more data. What is? Matlatsi, give me a second. I'll be back.
Okay, no problem. While you're out, I'll just give them 4 questions to answer.
Sorry about that, Mahlatsi. It was a work call, so I couldn't decline it. But I am back, so we can continue. I think we can continue. We're good to go, right?
Yes, we're good to go.
All right. Sorry about that, guys. But as I was saying, we need to be able to read this file and then grab our array. Sorry about that. And then grab our array so that we can actually start working on it. So for that, let's go back to our file manager. So we need to be able to read the file. So we are reading the file. Obviously, this is similar to the function that we had at the top in terms of the structure. So if you want to optimize your code, you can actually even use a separate function for this and just keep on recalling it. But we have that, and then we're going to have the UTF-8, and then we are going to have the callback. So in this case, we're adding the student, so we're retrieving that. So I always console out my work in order to make sure that I actually don't have to be debugging a lot of information all at once. So here we are actually supposed to be adding a student. And then in terms of adding the student, we're actually supposed to be passing the information. So we're actually supposed to be grabbing the information directly this side. But we're going to test our function first. So one thing at a time. What do we need? We need the name. So in this case, I'm just going to create a simple, actually, let me just go straight into doing this. We are going to have the name. This is V. We have Nisi. We have age. 3 years old. And then the other one is an ID, which is going to be basically a unique identifier. In this case, we're going to pretend it's my actual ID number as it appears on my ID card. So this is also supposed to be, a promise. So let's come back this side, can make this async. And the reason for this, the reason I want it to be a promise is so that we can actually handle our data properly. If everything is successful, I want it to go ahead and show this information but otherwise I want the error to actually be handled. So we can actually handle the error and then have all of that. For now, we'll just say 500 and then message will be error, and then there won't be student. But in terms of this, wait. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. That's fine. Message created. I'm okay with this. Now let's just double check if this actually works. Let's go to student. We send that information. Okay, something is wrong here. Or maybe it's not because I actually have that, but I forgot that I didn't update this part, so never mind that. This side we have the data that I was talking about, and this is how it currently appears. So it appears as a string. So in order to make sure that we can actually utilize that data, we need to have it being passed into JSON so that it's more readable. We can actually use it in our code. So let's have that. We'll come back to Postman, we send, and as you can see, we now have something that's actually readable. Students is that. But obviously, because we are now trying to add information to our database, that means we can now go to JSON data dot students. Remember, in our database, we have an object. Currently, it's just students, and students is an array. So on JSON data.student, all methods that are applicable to JavaScript arrays, you can actually do that over here. So in terms of this, I'm just going to be using the array mesh method of push to update. But in this case, I'm going to be adding, what do you call this? An object. So we're going to be passing the name, signing, age as well as ID. And then after that, we need to be able to then save this data back into our JSON database. So for this, we are going to use another function called write file. So come back down here, write file. Okay. Caesar, I got the message. Guys, do you have any questions before I continue? Is there anything that you need an explanation on? Because I just got a message saying that I'm apparently moving too fast. Oh, you just need me to slow down. Like at a very, very slow pace. So we're adding a student. Yes, Caesar, you can come in.
Maybe maybe at this point you can pause and then just re-explain the purpose or the problem that you're solving and go through the code and then take it and then finish off from there. Because I think yeah, there's a lot
Yeah.
going on. Yeah. Maybe just re-explain the problem and the approach to solve the problem and then address the code line by line. I think.
Okay. So the main problem that we had from last week is okay. Now we actually have a lot of files. I understand why people are getting lost. But last week we actually had dummy data, right? And there's no point to actually interact with an API if all the data that you're getting back is just going to be dummy. So when you actually update, you want to see the data next time you actually fetch. When you are posting, you also want to see it the next time you fetch. So if you started with one item, you want it to continue and so on and so forth. So coming back, this is our main file, which allows us to actually create the server and then listen to any triggers that are actually happening on the server. So whatever requests that are being sent against our API, this is where all of that happens. And then in terms of HTTP create server, this is where we are setting up the actual routes and telling it this is how I want you to behave when this happens. If a user does this, this is what I want you to do. So we had this last week, but in terms of today, I decided that since we're going to have a lot of code or lines of code, might as well just create a function for handling everything that's coming to our student endpoint. So that's why we have that file. And in order to actually access it, this side, we are exporting it. So exports.handle students request allows us to actually have access to whatever functions I write here. So this side, I'm just making sure that I can actually access it. And then in order to call it, this is where I am calling it. Const handle students request equals to require. And then in terms of this is different because this is internal. If you're doing internal imports, you need to specify the path. Specify the path. So that's why I started with the full stop. So now make sure you're using relative paths. So that, and then I'm saying we're basically in the same level as this actual file. So that file, same level, we are looking for something called student request, and then there it is. But the difference between this and that, this is an external import. So it's coming from Node itself. So this is actually something that's embedded in Node. So this is a Node module. Meanwhile, this is something that I created myself. So that's why there's two different ways of doing it. If you're doing it, if you're importing directly from Node, or if it's a library that you installed, then you call the library directly, but otherwise you have to specify the path. So we have that, but we went a step further compared to what we did last week. So last week, everything was static. This week, we are focusing on making things dynamic. So since things are being dynamic, we created functions. So in this case, get student, which is coming from this side. So same thing. This is just a function that is accessible or going to be accessible from other files. And if you have it as async means you're now creating asynchronous code. And what it does is it actually returns a promise. So this function then becomes a promise, meaning that when the function gets called, we are going to, what is it? When the function is called, when func is called, we check if it was successful. or not. If it is successful, if success, let me remove that. If success, then our data, then data will be in the then block. Otherwise, if there's an error, the catch block will give us or show us the error. So we are doing it like this because this side, we want to listen. If it is successful, go ahead and reject with this status code, you set that header, and then you just return the actual result when you are getting the information. Otherwise, you want to handle it differently. Obviously, in terms of this is actually supposed to say error, but we're going to deal with that after. So this is a function, but the function, when it's called, it actually returns a promise. And this is the dot then. If it's successful, do this. On the dot catch, that means function ran into some error. But if it hits the dot then, that means the function call was successful. Okay, was a success? Was a success and data was returned. And then down here, you actually handle the data. And then same thing here, you run into an error and then you handle the error or actually show the fact that there's an error to the other side. And this file is only handling data that is being sent to localhost 3001/student. Any other data it's going to ignore because that's what we told it to do in terms of where are you in terms of this function. So if the path matches student, go ahead and do this. Otherwise, that means we don't recognize it, so it's going to give us a 404. And 404 means it does not exist. So if it's a path, it means it's a path that doesn't exist. So path not on API. If it is a resource ID, if you're using a resource ID, that means there's no resource or items matching the identifier. And then rest.end, we are terminating. We're terminating the API call so that in this case, since we're using Postman, so that Postman actually knows that, okay, so the server side is actually done running through these blocks of code, and maybe there was an error, or this is the data that I have for you, or there's no data, because otherwise it keeps on running and running and running and running. And then let me see. Okay, in terms of the file manager, we have create file, which is what I'm using to make sure that each and every time this is actually supposed to be down here. It's supposed to be right here. So the create file function is just checking if the file exists and set it up for us, so that we can actually use it without having to do double checks each and every single time. So this gets called each and every time the server is set up. And let me see. Okay, I think this is the crazy part, right? At the top, we have const f is supposed to require. We actually don't need this because I'm using this method. So what this allows us to do is I don't actually have to call fs.open, fs.read file, fs.append file, and so on and so forth. It becomes repetitive in a sense. And these are all functions that exist in the file system module, which allows us to play around with. Actually, you can update any of these files using this guy, but we are updating our .json file, database.json file, as we're using it as a mock database. So here I have the variable called file name, whereby I'm actually setting it up to be database.json. The reason I'm doing it like this is because if I'm to rewrite database.json everywhere, in some instances, I can make a mistake and write maybe database.jso. And then in that instance, I'll be working with a different file compared to the one I want to work with. Meanwhile, when you use a variable, if you make a mistake, it'll be easy for you to see because now it actually underlines it. It even tells you could not find file name. Did you mean file name? As long as you're paying attention to your code, because as you can see here, there's nothing. Here we have the 3 dots underlining the F. So I know that means there's a mistake over there. But if it's a string, it's hard to notice when you make a mistake in a string. And then we have the UTF-8. Here I'm just telling it, what do you call this? This is a standard, English is running away, but it's a format for working with files. So UTF-8, this is what I normally use. To be honest, I haven't really used the other ones. UTF-8 has been my go-to. It has always worked for me, so I never really needed to experiment with the others. And then here we have the error and data. This is a callback which returns error and data. So it accepts those as the argument. So down here, all I'm doing is, as I'm creating the collections, I'm reading the file and making sure that I create the array of students, and then I update that file with these collections. So here, I only have students because that's the kind of data we're working with. But if you wanted, you could have, I think I already did this, but then I didn't really update the actual file. You can have that, classes, you can have that. I'm going to delete this for now, and then I'll undo. Save so that it rewrites. So now, if we come back this side, as you can see, we have students, books, classes. So all this is actually being done by the code, which is where I've set it up this side. So this side I've set up the structure or the kind of data we expect to work with. And then this side, that's where I now update the actual, what is this? The actual file with our information. And then in terms of this, I said we are using append file because we only expect this function to run if there is nothing in our file. Let me show you what happens when we use append file. Meanwhile, actually, I don't think it's going to run. But what happens if when you use append file, I'm not sure if I can actually create collections and create collections. So either way, it's still creating the collections. Write file name. So for now, I'm just going to have create collections outside. Save that. We have that information. So now we're actually appending file twice, right? What happens is this. It creates our data, it still saves, but with append, it's actually adding at the end. So if you already have data, append file is not the best way to actually approach it because it ends up creating a very, very messy mock database. In this case, now we have that as an object, and then we have another object. And in a proper JSON object, you can only have one parent object. You cannot have the other one, which we just had. That's why it was actually even red, because it knows that this is actually an error. So we are using that first, this side, because it's empty at that point, right? But we are still creating our collections. But the moment we're already done with that, like for example, when we are now adding the student, oh, we are not there yet. We are going to be using write file, however, because we don't want to keep on adding duplicates. What we want to do is update or remove. Basically, what you're doing in terms of what we'll be achieving here is when there's an update, it overrides the data in a sense, so that you don't actually end up having duplicates like we did with append file. So only use once to create the file and have the initial setup. And then this side, create file, we are opening the file. And then here we actually have the callback where we're actually just checking if there's an error. If there is an error, all it's just doing is telling us that the file exists, and then it return in this case is actually exiting the function call. But otherwise, we are going ahead and actually creating the collections that we're going to utilize. Let me see, is there something that I did not cover? Oh, okay. The JSON.stringify and JSON.parse. With JSON.stringify, we're basically turning a JSON object into a string, which works well with our database. Because if I was to remove this, let me show you what happens. Might actually need to delete the database. Also delete that, and then rerun the server. As you can see, we now have an error on the right telling us that the data argument must be of type string or an instance of buffer, typed array, or data view, but it received an instance of object, which is what I said, because this is an object. So I opted for a string, which in this case, I turned my object into a string using JSON.stringify. And then when we're reading our data, we need to use JSON.parse because it's actually reading it and it's receiving a string. So we need to actually turn that into an actual object so that we can actually use code in order to work with the data, which is what I was doing down here. So our data, this side, it actually comes back as, actually it was not a string, it was, what is this? It was a buffer. But with JSON.parse, it allows us to actually change that data so that we can actually start working with it. Therefore, we can now return, basically just send back the information back to the calling function, which is this side. So I have the get student as well as add student. I think I've covered everything. If you guys have any questions, you can go ahead and ask before I continue. For those who said I was moving too fast, I'm sure it was because maybe you're getting lost because you have questions. So I think we can take a few questions before I continue.
All right. Does anyone have a question for Fukona?
Sounds quiet.
It is quiet. Okay, Anonymous
Very
says that that was beautifully explained. Thank you. So yeah, I don't know.
All
Yeah.
right.
Any concerns, questions, anything? All right, so I guess you can move on. Okay, no, we
All
do
right.
have you now. There's a hand up from
Okay.
one.
All right.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Can.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I wanted to ask about since previously we've been like sort of writing data manually, and then you said now, uh, like like the past, like you just show us now, where are we getting the data now since we're no longer writing it manually? And
Okay. Okay, no, one question at a time, because I
okay,
might get lost. So to answer that question, for now, I am using, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? So I'm currently on the post. Remember, with our post request, it allows us to actually add data, right?
yes,
So for now, I'll be doing it here just for testing purposes. So I hard coded the actual data that we're going to be working with, but then moving forward, after I've tested that this function works the way I want it to, we are going to be sending our data using post on Postman. So this is how we're going to set it up.
okay.
Yeah.
This sort of answered the follow up question also.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Pleasure. I guess that's the only question I had. Oh, there's Pito Manik.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh yes. So I wanna play around with this. Uh there's some Next.js thing I was playing around with. Is this a good way to sort of use Postman as a interface to add data into the database instead of just manually adding it there? Would it be a good solution for testing purposes?
Um, what I would say, that always depends on what it is that you're trying to achieve. Because
Yeah,
if you have an API endpoint on your
yeah,
Next.js application, right?
yeah,
Then yes, Postman is a great tool to actually utilize, but it's not the only tool. I only prefer Postman because I'm more familiar with it and I get to save all my requests this side and access them from any other application. But yes, you'll need a way to test your API endpoints because if you are using your application and there's multiple different applications, front-end applications using that
yeah,
API, it becomes complicated if you're going to keep on logging in, doing whatever just to test the API. Why not
yeah.
test it using something that's focused on just testing APIs? And then you know exactly what's happening. And then when you integrate it into your front end side of the applications, then
Yeah.
you already know how it works, or if something works or if it doesn't.
Also, would you say Postman is ideal for testing purposes?
Yes, that's what I always use. I remember, I think it was Caesar who mentioned if you are going to be building maybe a web application, for example, you might be
Yes.
using an API to get data and all of that, right?
Yeah.
Now imagine how much of a headache it would be if instead of just trying to test out the endpoints that you got from your weather service, you go
Yeah.
straight into inserting it into your code. First thing, you're
Oh,
not really sure of the structure of the data. You're not even sure which endpoint you might have access to, because sometimes there's some that are free, some are not. So with Postman, you can hit that endpoint with all your credentials and see how the data comes back. So now when you go to your actual code on the front end, you know how you need to structure your actual logic.
No, all right. All right, thank you.
My pleasure. Do we have any other questions?
Nope, we don't have any other questions.
Okay. If that's the case, I think I can continue from here. I broke my application. Okay, so this is line 14, file manager. Let us see what, oh, I did fix that. And then in terms of this, I was working on, so now because I've gone back to explain everything, I would like to apologize in terms of the pace that I'm using. One, we do have limited time and there was a lot that we're supposed to cover today. And two, I also get too excited when I'm talking about something that I love. So really apologize for that to the people that are lost because of the pace I was using. Okay, so we are adding a student. Right now, we're not going to be adding the student directly using Postman because we are just testing if this actually works. So we are going to save that. I hope there's nothing that I changed because if I did, it's going to break on me. So we're still on the add student. Remember I said if we're adding, we actually need to read the data, make changes to the data on the server. And then after making changes to that data, then that's when we're going to now override or overwrite the data that's already there. So we have read the data. We have captured that in terms of something that we can use in JavaScript. And then we've made changes since JSON data, where are you? Okay, it's actually supposed to be right on top. Oh, snap. I removed everything. I need to. Okay, I need to delete this because now I have no information in my database and that will give me problems. Yes, there we are. So students is actually an array. So because students is an array, that means we can use all the array methods that exist, your filters, your maps, your for each, all of those. So this side, in order to add, I'm using the dot push, meaning that it's going to actually add it as the last item, and I'm pushing an object. And I remember our session on this day, I did say this is shorthand. What happens is this basically becomes name, this becomes a key, and then the value. But if you have it like this, it automatically creates a key for you called surname, and it matches it to whatever variable that it can find that has the same name. So this and this is the same thing, and then ID. Let me do this for readability's sake. So the other way I was doing it is just a shorthand. So we have that information. So now on the right file, we actually need to specify. Remember, we always need to specify the file name, otherwise it doesn't know what is happening. So file name, then JSON to stringify our data. So our data is the JSON data. And then we want to double check if there's any error. If there is, and this is a function, so in most cases, this has brackets around it. But if there's only one argument, you're okay even if you don't have the brackets. So error, if we have the error, we just want to throw the error. So we just want to actually show the error, otherwise we're going to say data updated. Data updated. And then This is async, meaning it's supposed to return data. We'll come back to that in a minute. So this is the post. We send, we have that. Let us see if it was successful. There's our data. But currently it's not dynamic, right? And I can continue triggering that, and it will just continually add that information. In order to format this, by the way, since it was going left to right, I used Control Alt and F to make sure that it's more readable for those who are interested in that shortcut. So we have that data, we're updating our students, and as you can see, books and classes remain untouched. They're still part of our data, but they're still untouched. So now what we want to do is, where are you? Sorry, I'm also losing myself in my own code. At this point, we are supposed to be this side. What we now want to do is we actually want to read the information coming in. So in order to do this, there is something, there's an option called rec.on. Where are we? Why doesn't it autocomplete? I don't like the fact that it's not auto-completing, but feel like I am missing something. But rec.on, then data, and then we are going to have our actual data. So this will actually allow us to read information coming in so that we don't actually have to write it like this. And then for this, we are going to have name, surname, age, and ID. And this will be equals to data. So yet again, this is a shortcut so that I actually don't have to write it like this. Data.name. Okay, let me say names because I already have that and it gives an error. So instead of having to write it like this, because now I'll actually have 4 lines just to extract my data from data. This is a shortcut in order to grab data from an object, since this is going to be in the form of an object. So if you want, so that you don't get lost, you can actually use this syntax and so on and so forth for each and every single one. So that means you'll have const name equals to data.name, const name equals to data.surname, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and double check if I wait. I think this is actually supposed to be JSON. Yeah, this is supposed to be JSON.parse. But anyway, let's go ahead and actually do this. So I only want this function to get called after I've managed or tried to read data from our request. So that is saved. Let's see. As you can see, this is all our data. Wait a minute. Yeah, that is messy. This is our data. This is different data. I want this data. So that data, I need to. So I have data. Let's have JSON data, because we need to JSON.parse for readability. And then here, instead of just calling data directly, this is going to be our JSON data. And then we're going to console log our JSON data. Let's go back to Postman. make that request. And as you can see, we now have our JSON data. So now we can remove all of that information. So we have name, surname, age, and ID. And then in terms of the student, what I want to have is student. So in some cases, the APIs that you make use of, they just return back the data that you actually just sent. So we can also do the same thing to say, okay, yes, it was successful, and this is what we've just added. And because it's now one object, it doesn't have to have square brackets because it's no longer an array. So let's go ahead. We have this information, right? 33.7 years old. And as you can see, that is the information that comes back. So if we have clarity, then I don't know, say 33, and then we update this, right? I don't think that was the same number of digits, but anyway, as you can see, we now have that. So now we can actually send data to our database. So we have V, we have V, we have V. So this is before when I was testing with hard-coded data. And then we have Ukwana, we have Mahlatsi. So our post actually works. So now we also need to be able to actually retrieve this information. 11:38, we are running out of time. So we have the get students. This is okay. Let me see. That was already set up, so this should actually return the actual information that I want. Cool, correct. So our post as well as our get actually work, meaning that we can actually add new students, and we can also retrieve the list of students. So excuse me. So we have two requests that currently work, but then with a get, remember I did say that sometimes you want to get all items, which is what we're doing in this case. But what happens if, what would happen? What happens? What happens if I already know the ID of the person that I actually want to retrieve? I have the ID, I just want the rest of the information regarding them. So instead of that, let me come back this side. Let me see what IDs I actually have this side. Let's go with that. Okay. Not sure if it's the same. Okay, it's not the same. What happens in this case? So that runs endlessly. I have no idea why. Okay, that was before. Okay, so now my console log is actually all over the place because now there's a lot of information. But where are we? So the right method is that. Another thing that we're looking for is on the student server. Let's go back. If student equals to that. Past URL, we have the past URL. We have the path name. There's a couple of things that I need to do here because the people who are helping out used different setup that I would actually use for this. Okay, there we are. So the path is still the same. I want to change this because what I want is the path is actually considering that as well as this. Meanwhile, this in our case is going to be the path. This becomes the resource identifier or resource ID. As in this case, the student ID. So we are going to introduce a bit of code just to help us here. There may be different ways of doing it. So my method is not the only way to go about it. That is a comment. So what am I doing? I am breaking the path into segments. And then we'll be left with path and param ID. So for this, let's go ahead and actually create, we have the path, which is the path name. So that will be the overall path. What we want is, I'm going to change this to URL because I want to be able to do this. So const URL goes to that, and then your segment equals to URL.split. And then in this case, we want to split the moment you have the /, we want to actually split it. Right? So what happens is we'll have the URL segments looking like this. We hit send. Okay, it's comparing about the URL. Where did I go wrong? Student server line 22. Okay, it's because that already exists. So we can say URL path. Okay. Even down here, so this is going to be URL path. Let's go ahead and see what happens. Okay, that is fine. That is supposed to happen. But as you can see now, if you focus on the logs, we now have students as well as the actual identifier. Right, so this is what I'm going to use. Let's go ahead and here, no need for the / at the current moment because I've already actually broken it apart. I'm going to have path. Actually, we can still use path. Now it won't really make sense, but anyway, my mind is not working with me at this point. So remember when you split something, it actually becomes an array just like here. So in terms of how we're splitting it, the first item will just be empty. The second item will be the actual path. And then the third item will be the ID or the parameter if you actually have that. So in this case, we are going to say index 1, and then we're also going to have parameter, also ID. So that also is going to be URL segments, but in this case, this is going to be 2. So we console those 2 paths as well as param ID. We can bring back the path since I decided to use that either way. Come back to Postman. As you can see, we now have our path and then we have the param ID. Why am I doing this? Because handle students is that, but if we have the param ID, we want to send it forward. Yeah, we want to send it forward to come this side. That means we now are also going to be receiving the param ID. So in this case, In this case, if rec.method equals to get, right? We want to get the list of students, but we also want to check if param ID exists. If param ID exists, we are now going to only get one student. But if param ID doesn't exist, we are getting all of them. We are going to have to create a function specifically for this, but it's more or less the same. So what we can do is paste that and remove the S, and then we're going to create that function. So it doesn't exist yet. Let's come this side. And since this is get student, we are going to have export dot get student equals to async. And then this is more or less copy and paste. Just that we want to do it for one specific person. And how do we make sure that we only get one person? What you can do is use the filter, right? Remember, this is actually supposed to have the parameter. We can actually call it student ID in this case. On the filter, we want to run through the list of students, and then if the student dot ID matches our student ID, then that's what we're going to return. So we need to double check if this actually works the way we want it to. So this is supposed to have param ID as an argument. Let's save that. Let's come back this side. Let us see if this works. And there we are. So now we grab one student. Meanwhile, this other one is still grabbing all of them, as you can see. So that's the first part. Now we need to also be able to update. Or maybe we should actually focus on deleting. Yeah, let's focus on deleting. With the deleting, it's going to be similar to this. Wait a minute. Oh yeah, this was getting. It's in terms of deleting, it's going to be similar to this function, but we are going to be writing also. So we're going to use the filter to actually remove when the ID is the same, and then we're going to write. So it's going to be a bit of a mix of the features that we're using currently. So let's go ahead and have our delete, not delete file, but delete student. So in this case, we are going to have the student ID. But I'm sure that you can see already, like there's a bit of a pattern to the madness. The moment you already understand what it is that you're trying to do, it becomes easier to utilize the things you want to. So we're grabbing that data, and then here, what we want to do is we're going to have JSON dot students equals to JSON.students dot filter. So we're actually overriding our own array. And then I need to double check if this is actually working the way I need it to. So we're going to have JSON data. And then what I want is for it to go directly to the students. Okay. I'm tired. It's sitting down too long. So I want to make sure that I can actually get that information. We'll come back to this side. Where do we have our delete request? So obviously with the delete request, we also have to be getting the param. Wait a minute. Okay, so that is accessible to all of the methods that are here. So more than happy with that. What we need is we have get student, that let's have delete student. And then we're going to have delete student down here. We are going to send it the param ID. And then the rest is the same. So we're going to have our promise, because I promised to return data, or I am going to cancel out. So in this case, we are going to have, let's cut that, paste that over there, paste that over there also. So right now we're still testing, so I don't really mind what's currently here. Save that. So let's go to the delete. I need the ID. Okay, that is working, but obviously it's working the opposite way because it's only returning one specific person, which is the person I want to remove. So in this case, we want to return what doesn't match that ID. So let's go ahead and do that. And there we are. So let me see. Yeah, we're V, and then Mahlat. So we are looking up. And then obviously, because this is the same, I'm just going to copy and paste this. So still the same variable. Make sure that the variable matches. I've been using JSON data in all of my functions. So that's pretty much everything. In this case, we're going to say data deleted. Save that. And then in terms of deleting, we don't have to return any information back. We can just leave it like this, we save, and then come back, send, and then data deleted. Let's come back to our JSON data. Okay, I think I was working on this, so it didn't really. Let's compare. Nope. Let's just save this, override. I don't want to edit that right now. We delete, we come back this side. As you can see, Wokona is now gone. There's only V, and then Shat. So Wokona is gone. And like I said, though, when it comes to me pushing new items, because this is a unique ID, this is supposed to be unique. So you might also want to put logic to make sure that if an item already matches the ID, you reject the post request. I am not going to do that because of time, and we still have one more that we actually need to deal with, which in this case is when you're updating. So the logic for deleting and updating are kind of similar. They're a bit similar. So what I'm going to do is we can just copy and paste, but let's just write everything. So this is going to be update student. And then we're going to have async. First of all, we need the student ID. We cannot update items if we don't know which item we need to update. And then the next thing, your name, your surname, your age. Remember, the ID cannot be updated because it's a unique identifier. So in this case, the only thing that can be updated is the other three things. So let's go ahead and have our function. This is the same information, by the way, so I'm just going to quickly run through this. We have our JSON data. This is going to be JSON.parse, and then data. So now what do we want to do? we want to update. So what we can do here is, okay, this is actually supposed to be let. So we want to run through the list of students. You can use your for loops, whatever method you know to actually iterate through a loop. You can go ahead and do that. But for my use case, I am going to be using I'm going to be using a map. So JSON data.students.map, and then we're going to run through the students list. If the student ID matches the student.id. So remember, the student ID in this case refers to the ID that I'm going to be passing through Postman. But then the student .id is the one that is in our database. So we're checking between the two. If this is true, what we want to do is we're going to return an object. Obviously, the object is going to have the ID, which in this case is student.id. And then we are also going to update the name. So the name is coming from the argument, surname is also coming from the argument. And then we also have the age coming from the argument. But otherwise, if that is the case, what we want to do is just return, not rerun, but return the student. So remember, this is actually an object. As it's actually going through the items, this is an object. So that means it's just going to return that object. Otherwise, it's going to return an object with updated information. So what this does is it allows us to actually update this other guy on the left side. And then after that, we can now write to file. So we can take that and paste. So let's go back to student request with a put. We now have update. We are about to run over time because it's not 12 o'clock, but I'm almost done. We are sending it param ID, then we're going to have the dot then. We'll have the result, we'll have that, and then we'll have the dot catch. Bum, 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 bum. So with this, when it's updated, I'll also be sending the actual information that we just got. But this is also getting information from Postman, meaning that we also need to have this kind of setup because we actually need to read that data. So we're also going to have rec.on, which allows us to actually listen to changes that happen. In this case, when you pass data in as string, it's saying listen for changes in terms of our data object. If there's data, go ahead and handle it this way. So this is the same thing. Remember, we need to have, this is JSON data, first of all. So our JSON data is going to be JSON.parse. Then we pass it the data, because otherwise it's not going to be readable. So from our JSON data, we want to grab everything else. And then this is going to be equals to JSON data. And then we are going to be grabbing the name, surname, as well as the age.
Vukona,
Yes.
sorry for intercepting. Yeah, it's 12 now.
Yeah, don't worry, I'm almost done. Just 2 minutes.
Okay, thanks.
All right, cool. So we're grabbing that information and then passing it to this guy. This guy is supposed to be inside here. And then we have name, surname, as well as not ID, but the age. So let's go ahead and see if this actually works. In terms of this, also, we're just going to be passing the same data, name, surname, age. You can also pass the ID. So ID is going to be equals to param ID. Let's save that. So this is a put request. Let's see if we did everything properly. So we need the ID also. So now overriding the object that is already there with new information. No, I do not want to save. Let us see. And it says it's updated. Let's go ahead into, okay, I don't know why I keep on doing this. I need to rerun it. Saved, and then as you can see, it actually updated. Okay, I kind of messed it up in terms of the structure because it's now upside down, but anyway, still the same information. We now have that. We have the name being updated, surname still the same. We also have the age being updated, but the ID is still the same. So this is how you can actually make use of Node in order to work with local files. You are not limited to just the .json file, by the way. You can actually basically do anything else. It's what do you call it? CSVs, your Excel, even your spreadsheets. Obviously, that would be a nightmare though. But even your Word, you can also use it to actually keep track of maybe times when it actually breaks apart, when there are errors in your server. You can actually just write a script that actually allows you to update, and then it keeps a log for you. But this is how you manipulate files using Node. So that was all for today, and I hope you guys actually were focused, you are learning. To those who are asking questions, thank you very much. And I can see that you're actually paying attention. You it seems like you're actually retaining the information that we are sharing with you guys, so I do appreciate. And then the ones who are quiet, I hope you guys are following as well. Probably maybe you're just in a loud place, that's why you're not able to talk. But this is everything that I had for you guys today, and I hope you enjoyed. Mahlati, Cheledi, back to you.
Thank you so much for Kona. It seems as if like we have a hand up from Kwanele. Kwanele, yes, you can proceed and ask your question.
So my question is that are we gonna have a task that's gonna be due tomorrow? Because I feel like today we did so much. I feel like also I still need to rewatch the video. If you wanna upload it, can it be earlier so that maybe we can be ready for a task if it's coming? Thank you.
I'm not so sure in terms of giving you a task this time around. Since we're gonna have a session, I think it's tomorrow as well.
Okay.
So I think I'm gonna let you guys breathe for today.
Okay, thank you. But also, this was very interesting. For the first time, I was so focused on this, and not for the first time, but this was very insightful. And I would like to rewatch the video and go over all the concepts you've done today. And I was wondering when will be the recording be available?
No, we'll share the recording as soon as we're done processing. Thing is, sometimes we actually have to edit, so that's where it takes a bit of time.
That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, but we'll share as soon as we can. Don't
Okay.
worry.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Thank you, Kolisi.
Hi, Bukona. Just a quick one. With regarding to like dealing with asynchronous operations, I just want to find out that is there a fundamental difference between just using awaits rather than using .then, or is one better than the other?
Yes. So what happens in terms of asynchronous code, that is, right? When you're using .then, it allows the rest of the code in that code block to continue running. But when you use await, you are essentially turning an asynchronous code and forcing it to run synchronously. So any line of code or block of code that comes after you have used await is not going to run until that await block actually gets its respond or its result.
Okay, but isn't it the same with .then as well?
Not necessarily with the .then. Let me see if I can. With the .then, what happens is it's not. This is not what I'm looking for. You see, with the .then, right? In terms of the lines of code that won't run until you have a result or an error, it's only inside here and here. Let me see if I can do this. Waiting for .then. Not really sure if this will actually work the way I want it to, because this is on the server side and some rules get to change. Can you see what happened? It said waiting for .then first, right? And then everything else happened after. But then the waiting for .then is actually the last part. So these lines of code did not run, but this did, while this was actually waiting for a result. But what happens with await, let me see if I can. Okay, let me comment this out. So I'm going to copy this and then comment it out. So this is when you're using .then, then this will be when you are forcing it to be await. So we have add student. What I'm going to do is going to be const result equals to await add student. Essentially doing the same thing, name, age, and then ID. Obviously, this is complaining because wherever you use await, you need to use async also. So we now have that. And then what is the next thing? We have this. So we can go ahead and actually have our result. And so this is the post. We can just have it like this. What happened? What happened? What happened? We can have it like this. Oh, okay. I copied something I was not supposed to copy. We can have it like this, right? But then if I have a log down here, like we did before, waiting for our wait. This will essentially be the last thing that gets hit. And the funny thing is this, in most cases, this is actually going to break our server. Actually, it doesn't. This is, okay, so seems like you're actually right, but this is not how it actually is supposed to be, because with our wait, it stops everything else from running, but think my assumption was wrong in terms of this. This is actually supposed to not run until the rest of the code has actually been run through. Okay. Okay. Because seems like it actually runs the other way around on the server. So essentially, policy, you are right. It's more or less the same in terms of node.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions? Mahlatsi?
No questions for Kona. I guess we're good.
I guess we're good.
I guess we good.
Okay, before we go, am I hallucinating?
Why do you say that?
The await actually runs contradictory to what I expected. In JavaScript, this actually gets blocked out the whole way through. Okay, that can be a side conversation.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you very much for attending. Wait, I think I'm stealing a job. Sorry. Back to you.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much, Bukona. Thank you to everyone. You will receive communication later on. Once the video has been processed, then we can now send it to you after editing it. And then, yeah. And then you'll also get an invitation for tomorrow and the next session again. Tomorrow's session and the day after tomorrow. So thank you so much for participating, and we're looking forward to seeing you in the next session. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.